with. If you go to probe.org, you can get a biblical or Christian perspective on
Sure.
it, can't you?
And pointofview.net would be the other one for some other point of view material as well.
Kirby, when we have Fire Away Thursday in 5 minutes, you're going to be here, obviously, in studio with Ray and I to host it. What are we going to be talking about?
Surveillance, and it's something, Tim, you and I picked a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and you couldn't have picked a better news story. I like how the Obama administration really helps us out on this. We have found out now the National Security Agency has access to your calling records if you have Verizon. That's the one we know about so far. I suspect we'll find out it's others as well. And so, Tim, we've gone from a situation in which we were saying, well, they had the phone records of James Rosen, they had the phone records of the Associated Press. Now it turns out they have the phone records of a lot of our listeners here today. So
Unbelievable.
I'm going to be talking about the surveillance and how Big Brother is watching you.
We're going to get into that in just a few minutes. That's going to be our topic for Fire Away Thursday. But first of all, we don't normally do any other stories when we have Kerby on. We jump right into our topic. But there was an important story yesterday that Fred Jackson, our news director for American Family News and OneNewsNow.com, brought to my attention that I wanted him to tell us about. Fred, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be here. An update on Susan G. Komen Foundation. Now, Susan G. Komen Foundation, known for raising money for breast cancer research, a very noble cause. And they've been raising millions of dollars for that for years. Well, back several years ago, we started to pay attention to Susan B. Komen Foundation a little bit more because it was learned they were giving some of that money that they earned from people running in the races to Planned Parenthood. And so we brought that to the public's attention. Now, many people, many Christian ladies in particular, were involved with the Run for the Cure for the Susan B. Foundation. And they were shocked. I remember getting approached at church from ladies saying, you got to be wrong. They don't give any money to Planned Parenthood. Well, yes, they do. Because at some Planned Parenthood clinics, there are mammograms are carried out there. So when it was learned and when people started to realize it was true that Susan B. Komen Foundation was giving some of that money to Planned Parenthood, a lot of people got upset about that.
Because Planned Parenthood's the largest provider of abortions in America.
Exactly. Well, last year, the officials with the Susan B. Komen Foundation got so much flack for that, the contributions to Planned Parenthood, that they announced that they were going to cease to give any money to Planned Parenthood. Well, the pro-abortion crowd got really upset over that, so much so that Susan B. Komen Foundation reverts its decision on that. Now, the news that we have today in front of us is that the Susan B. Komen Foundation has announced that it's canceling these races in a number of big cities, including Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and along with 3-day events in Washington, D.C. and Arizona. And what has happened is apparently the numbers have dropped so significantly since the controversy last year that they don't feel it's worthy running those events, operating those events in those major cities. Now, the foundation has come up with some excuses. They say, well, the economy is hurting, and we figure that's why the numbers are down, etc. But the story we have in front of us from the Washington Post notes that the Avon Walk for Breast Cancer, they're not canceling any of their events this year. Now, they live in the same economy as the Susan B. Komen Foundation.
Susan G. Komen.
Susan G. Komen Foundation. But they're not canceling any of their events. So the question then becomes, what has happened to the Susan G. Komen Foundation? Well, the liberal media seems to think it's the Planned Parenthood people are still angry. That's the excuse that they're giving. Well, that doesn't make sense because the Komen Foundation announced last year they're going to resume funding to Planned Parenthood. So one is left to believe the real reason behind this is that those who used to support the foundation and were happy with the decision not to fund Planned Parenthood, they are unhappy with the decision to resume funding of Planned Parenthood from the foundation, and they're not showing up for these races.
Kerby?
Well, and that's exactly what you can argue. I've had some pretty good arguments with one news director that tried to spin this recently and saying, well, this is because they decided to withhold funding of Planned Parenthood and then reinstated that. And I said, well, no, those people should be happy. The evidence is, and I think as a talk show host, you've seen this as well, Tim, all sorts of people when this was first announced that they were going to withdraw funding of Planned Parenthood, I had person after person. I've had woman after woman that's actually marched and walked in some of these different events say, I didn't know they gave to Planned Parenthood. So once the information was out, I think the evidence is very, very clear that the people that are withdrawing their support of Komen Foundation are obviously the people that are pro-life and were shocked to find out that they had been marching in an event that sent money to a pro-abortion organization.
Yeah. As I say, the liberals media is going to spin this the way they want, but it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, because the Susan G. Komen Foundation, they should not be giving any money to Planned Parenthood. They should be focusing all on the issue. This is what they would say that they do on breast cancer research and such. That their argument would be that Planned Parenthood in some places do mammograms.
Mostly they refer for mammograms. So
They refer.
That's the argument I even have with people like Nancy Brinker
They don't
and
even
others.
do them themselves.
Yeah, you're not even really, it doesn't make any sense at all other than the fact that some of the people on your board were. And of course, the one individual that moved ahead to try to prevent the funding of Planned Parenthood, she eventually resigned. Of course, we've had her on the radio program.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense at all. There's some evidence, Tim, as you well know, that individuals that have had multiple abortions might even be more likely to get breast cancer in the first place.
Yes.
And of course, that's been something that's been a real controversial issue, but assuming that to be the case, and I think there's biochemical reasons to argue for that, then you have an organization that is fighting breast cancer, funding an organization that might actually be increasing the number of breast cancer women out there. So I think you've got all sorts of problems with it.
And absolutely. So the bottom line of the story is that the numbers are down for the Susan G. Komen Foundation in terms of their
Participants in the run. So much so that next year they're canceling the events in several big cities.
In major cities, yes.
Wow. So this hurt them.
Absolutely.
This hurt them bad. I guess it's a shame because they have a good cause, but you don't need to be funding when funding a organization that's the largest provider of abortions in America. You don't think that's going to be a problem with a large number of your constituents?
Exactly.
Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
And we found that. Do you have a news story up now on that on One News Now? Okay, go to onenewsnow.com, onenewsnow.com to find out more information on the story we just discussed. I'm Tim Wildman with Kerby Anderson. Kerby's in studio with us today, co-hosting the program with Ray. And Ray Pritchard is with me. Ray, we're going to jump into this topic now of surveillance. Have you heard about this